We really appreciate you for joining tonight. My name is Nima Farshi, and I'm the director of the Center for Social Value Creation here at the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. Here at the Center for Social Value Creation, it's our mission to educate, engage, and empower Smith students to create a better world through business. We strive to create a world where businesses operate for the long-term value of both people and profit. A few logistical things as we get started. This event is being recorded and will be posted to the University of Maryland Smith School YouTube page. We just want everyone to be aware of that. This is also going to be, as Adrian said, a very interactive session. So feel free to turn your cameras on, use the chat box. We want this to be very engaging and just a fun time to get to know Tata in general. So tonight we're very excited to host the Tata Innovation Dialogue and the launch of the second year of Tata's Global Internship Program. For those of you who might not know, Tata Group is an Indian multinational conglomerate headquartered in Mumbai, India. It was founded in 1868 by Jamsetji Tata, and today Tata generates revenues of over $113 billion annually and employs over 700,000 individuals. What's even more remarkable is that Tata employs not only so many fifth generation employees, but it is such a values driven organization and part of our coalition for better businesses. Being a mission driven leader in international business is not only a statement by Tata, but it's true to its governance. 2/3 of Tata Sons is owned by Tata Trust, showing that being an impact driven business is part of every single decision that is made. So to start our event tonight, we're privileged to be joined by Adrian Terron, Head of Customer Centricity at Tata Group, and Kavita Mahto, General Manager of Customer Centricity at Tata Group. An introduction to both of them, who are so amazing and we are so fortunate to have to us. For Adrian, he is responsible for the customer centricity initiatives across the group and uses his expertise to conceptualize, drive, and evangelize customer centricity, including customer insight for existing and new businesses. Adrian brings to the Tata Group significant expertise in consumer and shopper insights, consumer innovation, social media analytics, brand building, and marketing. He has authored several papers on consumer insight, shopper and retail dynamics, and innovation. He was the head of consumer innovation and consumer neuroscience for Nielsen in India's region. In this role, he was responsible for driving the product innovation, testing practice and portfolio, while strengthening and growing its pioneering consumer neurosciences businesses, which methodology has also been actively used by some companies of the Tata Group. Over the last several years, he has played a number of key senior roles at Nielsen. He began as the head of marketing and brand and was later instrumental in Nielsen's social media analytics joint venture with McKinsey to harness the growing power of consumer-generated media at a time when the social web was in its formative stages in India. During this time, Adrian and his team were credited with creating and patenting a social media brand equity evaluation system that won the prestigious Nielsen Emerging Product Idea Global Award. Adrian subsequently went on to lead Nielsen Retailer Services Division, working with the country's leading organized retailers to help shape data analytics strategies while also creating the company's largest shopper insights business. Earned a Six Sigma Executive Black Belt in tandem with this role, and went on to lead Nielsen's entire consumer insights and innovation business in the South Asia region prior to his most current position. Before his roles at Nielsen, he was part of Godrej Group and as head of Group Corporate Brand Communication and part of its Marketing Council. In this role, he was charged with institutionalizing the corporate communications function, developing its capabilities, and conceptualizing a strategic framework that integrated key consumer insights into marketing initiatives. He contributed significantly to the brand's reputation and equity at the time of the relaunch of the Godrej master brand in 2008. And even before that, he began his career with CNBC in India, reporting on the consumer products and finance sector before joining the country's largest consumer research organizations prior to its merger with AC Nielsen. Kavita joined TAS program in 2008 and has worked in marketing and innovation for TGBL, Titan, and Tata Steel before moving on to Tata Sons. As the general manager of the Customer Centricity team at Tata Sons, she is responsible for the program's design, evaluation, and implementation. Prior to this, she founded and headed the innovation program at Tata Steel called Innovent. And as the head of the program, she was responsible for creating a separate services and solutions business vertical for Tata Steel with significant revenue targets. Before this, Kavita managed Tata Tyson, the flagship brand for Tata Steel. She has played an instrumental role in the brand's pan-Indian expansion and repositioning. She has had significant expertise in consumer insights, consumer innovations, channel management, and brand building. She has also collaborated with many leading academic institutions to create firsthand knowledge of these subjects. I genuinely want to thank both of you so much for your great time and insights tonight, and I'll let you take it over for part one of the Tata Innovation Dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you, Nima. Honored by your invitation and embarrassed by your introduction, I should say. Very excited to be here with a group of participants of such impeccable scholastic aptitude and business insight. We're looking at today's session not just as a showcase of what we are doing from the point of view of customer centricity, but also to get your ideas. So we have a selfish vested interest in staying up at what is right now 3:40 at night for us. So, our colleagues in HR told us that job number one while speaking to prospective joinees is to make all of you feel at home. And seeing as how they've organized this interaction with each of you at your own homes, for the most part, you can see that we're succeeding unbelievably well already. Now, the Tata Group's origins have always centered around serving the needs of a community. If you get into the history of it, and I'm sure Michael will touch on it, we're standing in the way of his presentation, so we'll try to make this as quick as possible. Now, over the last century and a half, we have expanded our footprint, our customer footprint, having traded the far reaches of the planet, has far exceeded our community footprint. And where we once began our journey in the industrial heartland of India, we've now expanded to so many continents, so many of which are represented on today's call. Now, half a decade ago, though, we realized that was our great and exciting opportunity, and it still remains so. The question was, how could we use our innate empathy for communities around the world to make our customers feel part of a larger community? And from that was born the Tata Group's Customer Centricity program. This kept us in tremendous readiness when the pandemic hit. And over the last 6 months, we have continuously engaged with the communities of professionals closest to the customer, our marketing leadership and our customer service leadership. And we want to talk to you about that today. And in fact, our customers themselves. So the result is what you are going to see today. Not abstractions, but the very same constructs and actions that we've been discussing with the business leaders across the group. So what I'd like you to do is turn your mind back to the start of the pandemic. And we had two distinct options. The first one, wait for things to blow over and business to get back to usual. Or the second one, which was come together and realize that the psychological and economic scars our customers will endure are something that they will need our resources to deal with. And this triggered a discussion that we needed. What we needed were ideas that would help us create not just recovery, but resurgence. And that's what we want to talk about today, because to us, that's what real innovation looks like. And really, that's where you come in, each of you on this call. So let me put a question to you. What do you think of when you think of civilization being under threat? Today we'll draw on your thoughts out here on the chat window. So let me ask you, when civilization itself is under threat, the people who stand to defend it are our superheroes. So our first question is, what's your favorite superhero? Why don't you type your answer into the window and let's see, for those of us who are superhero fans. Nima starting with, Batman, Apratim with Batman, Sarah, Magneto, very good. Mahesh, Iron Man, Alex following, Captain America, Niyati, very nice. Venom, okay, somebody's got issues. Hanuman, Black Panther. Sean Atmar says, Nima is my hero, all right. Doctor Strange, Greta Thunberg, of course. I'll touch on that a bit. Yes, Scarlet Witch, Gabriel, very nice. Ishan going with the hammer of Thor, very good. So you've got a whole range of answers, and you'll have that. Vito talks about Malala Yousafzai, of course. Ajay Shankar going for the wider inclusion with Green Lantern. Wonder Woman, Hulk. Very nice. Very nice. I think Michelle Obama is a real person. Okay. All right. AOC, of course. Why not? All right. I think we've got a fair few answers, and some conventional, some unconventional. But no matter which superhero you think about, the one thing you will notice about them, and Aparna, you can go to the next slide. You will notice about them is that they keep coming back. It's the sort of revolving door. No matter if they suffer irreparable harm or failure or crushing defeat, they may be ground down, but eventually, ever since they were created in the 1930s, they're always resurrected. And that's the first part of what we want to talk about. The other fact is, no matter which superhero you think about, you'll notice that they have a very strong linkage to a place. Even if it's AOC or Malala, they all linked to a specific geography, a specific place. If you think of the superheroes that we all know and love, Superman is linked to Smallville, Batman to Gotham, Wonder Woman to Themyscira, Harry Potter to Hogwarts, Spider-Man in Queens, New York, not very far from where most of you all are, and Black Panther to Wakanda. So the second thing we're going to talk about is place and the rejuvenation of what we call hotspots. And finally, no matter which superhero you think of, they have the ability to inject new life into things with great ingenuity and elan. And just when everything seems lost, they will pull something out of their hat and save the day. And that's how we're going to frame today's discussion. When we decided that the sudden grinding lockdown, which was imposed in many parts of the world, required new seeds of innovation, we first went into a huddle and reset our understanding of how consumers, of how the people we want to serve are feeling. And by talking to several of them, here's what we found so that we could feed this into the new innovation in a new post-pandemic world. Aparna, next slide. Right. So what you're looking at, I can just confirm that's right, is this whole flurry of sentiment, of emotion. And what we did when we spoke to all of these stakeholders, including people who were the most sort of severely hit by the pandemic, we discovered a range of emotions. Now, some of this, if you can reach back into your memory, despite being safely ensconced in your home, you might have felt. Now, chief amongst these emotions, as you can imagine, was the concern for safety, anxiety about financial security, and a general sense of uncertainty and disillusionment. Equally, we witnessed a great quest for meaning, a sense of solidarity, and a desire to help and experiment. But with all of this coming at people all at once, it results in what psychologists call a gang of emotions overwhelming you. So what does that result in? Let's look at the next slide. And we see the work and the understanding of a gentleman called David Kessler, one of the most world-renowned experts in emotional intelligence. And he tells us that when you're beset with so many emotions, it feels like collective grief. So resuscitating our relationship with consumers requires understanding what they are going through. And here's what that feels like. There's anxiety, there's fear, there's stress, isolation. Each of us, whether we like it or not, and some more than others, are going through the various stages of grief. So the next thing we needed to understand in order to resuscitate confidence and bring normalcy back so that we could feed our innovation pipeline with relevant ideas was to think about how this had changed behaviors that were manifesting. Now, to show you what that looks like, let me call upon my colleague Kavita Mahto, who came to us from Tata Steel, where she led an innovation program, as Nima referred to, that pursued the audacious goal of converting commodity steel into services and solutions to new consumers. The result is a business that today accounts for upwards of over $300 million. I give you our very own woman of steel, Kavita Mahto. I also want to say that you're unlikely to see her because her video isn't working, but she is a real person. It's not me acting like a ventriloquist. Kavita, over to you.
Thanks, Adrian, and thanks for that intro, which sort of made me a woman of steel, but also made me an imaginary person. Thank you, and hi everyone. Once again, it's very nice to be talking to all of you here. Like Adrian mentioned, it would be great if you could keep sharing your thoughts, etc., in the chat box while we speak. I would be very keen. We both, Adrian and I, would be very keen to understand what you think about what we are sharing, and we're equally looking forward to learn from you and your thoughts as we're looking forward to share ours with you. So, Aparna, if we could move to the next slide. What you saw in the previous one is various stages of grief, but the gentleman that Adrian mentioned about, David Kessler, also in his work talks about various kinds of grief, which people feel at different stages in their life. And in the past few months, one kind of grief which has been quite prevalent according to research has been anticipatory grief, which means a kind of grief which you feel because your future just now is so uncertain. So you put yourself in your future self, you project your future, which is not looking very bright just now, and you feel grief according to that or due to that. And because of that, this has led to many changes in the way people think, they feel, and how they prioritize. What we have tried to understand by talking to consumers, talking to experts, etc., is how do these changes manifest in their behavior, and eventually what do they mean for the businesses. So let me share the top ones for you, with you here. Aparna, if you could move to the next slide. What you see on the slide here are a few facts, but and I'll not touch upon them if I request you to go through them. But let me step back a bit here. And if you look at these, and there are many different changes which are going on, and not just these. These are by no means comprehensive. But if you really look at them, if you really try to sort of create a picture out of them, what we realize happens is there are four big shifts which emerge in consumer behavior, which we are seeing, or people behavior rather, which we are seeing across the world on in various degrees. And let me take you through those four big shifts, which are changing the entire consumer paradigm according to us. The first one, which links directly to the anticipatory grief, is this huge concern for safety. And this concern is across different dimensions, whether it is physical, mental wellness, financial safety, and safeguarding of the career and education plans of different of people who are in different life stages. And what's happened because of this quest for safety, whether it is physical safety, mental safety, or safety of your financial future, is that it is becoming a huge value proposition for the brand. And this is true because if you see the stocks of the companies which are able to address these concerns, they have skyrocketed in the past few months. While stock markets have been crashing around us as well. So that's the first shift in the behavior, which we have termed as protection, but it really means safety, and it's got different dimensions, like we discussed. But coming to the second shift is what we call purpose, and it's really about finding meaning to your life, assigning meaning to your life, but equally expectations from businesses in terms of not only focusing on their own concerns, their own transactions, and their own goals and growth, but looking at the society and community as a whole and helping the society out in a time like this. Again, if I go back to David Kessler, he suggests that compassion for others could be a good balm for grief. And the reason why we feel that purpose has become such a strong trend, even stronger than what it was, let's say, till last year, is what people have seem to have intuitively caught on to this truth, which is compassion could help you during the time of grief. It could be an outcome of introspection, or it could be an outcome of what they are themselves going through. But whatever is the reason, we see there is a great uptick in people's willingness to help others. If you look at the Google Trends data, for example, from early March to late September, in US itself, the search for the phrase "How can I help" has gone up about 1.5x, or even slightly more than that. So that's the one very important thing to note here, is that people are willing to help, but equally they are expecting the businesses to help others, and that's one of the most important marker of this particular trend. The third shift that we're looking for, and that's really very obvious and being talked about a lot, is connectivity. And on the slide you can see we mentioned the first time digital purchase, but it's much more than just the uptick in the digital purchase. And let me quickly share some statistics around that. So the one statistics actually which I really wanted to share with you as I was going through few reports on how digital has been leapfrogging is that the pandemic has resulted in a time jump of about 3 years on an average. So in North America, the average share of digital interaction has gone up by 20 to 25%. There are many categories that have seen huge jump in their digital customer base, and there are enough indication if you look at the surveys that have been are being published by consultants almost on a weekly basis. There is enough indication that shoppers are planning to stick to their digital behavior even after the pandemic slows down. So this has really permanently changed the way people purchase and they consume. And there are some arguments that this would have happened anyway, but the fact that this has accelerated to this extent means that the innovations need to catch up. Whatever the company's strategies were, whatever their plans were earlier, that may not pan out or that may not be sufficient to serve a consumer which has moved on so far as their intent, their behavior, etc. are concerned. And the last one that I would like to highlight in terms of the shift is this heightened need for comfort. Now, the comfort and convenience is something which has always been a need and which has always been sought after by consumers. But what we're talking about here is not just the physical comfort. While it's true that many consumers today are switching brands, switching retailers, one for better value proposition, but also for more convenience. But this goes beyond that. If you look at Edelman Brand Trust Report, and that's a report that comes every year and reflects on what consumers really expect from brands to be able to trust them, you will see that their expectations has really blown out of proportion when immediately after COVID-19. So if I were to list some of the expectations that people have, it is they want the brands to protect, to partner with them, to connect with them at not just on a transaction level, but at an emotional level, to inform them, to educate them, and to empathize with them. So that's a lot to expect, one can argue, but this is how it's panning out. And in this new role, the brands have to actually take on a lot. And how can they possibly take on all of this and therefore still remain? Yes, Nima, that's right. It's definitely a lot to expect from brands, but that's how people are really behaving. That's how they're expecting, and experts say that this is what will stick. This is how it will continue to be, and we will need to sort of keep trust as businesses at the core of all the customer relationships. So, like we said, it's a lot to consider, but if that's what customers are expecting, then brands have to serve, brands have to respond, and that's where customer centricity comes in picture. But that's where also innovation comes in picture. So innovation could have different intent. And in this case, if we were to say that the intent is to respond this new paradigm, to this new consumer, which has emerged out of this pandemic, and which sort of kind of going to stay around much later than the pandemic is going to. Then my question to you guys would be that if you imagine yourself as the CEOs of businesses, what would your questions would be? How would you define innovation for your team? How would you set the context and how would you set the target? What will you really, as a leader, give as guidance to your team for innovation? So, Aparna, if you can move to the next slide. Um, Yeah. So this is a question really as business leaders, how will you, given all the changes which are happening, given all the shifts that we just discussed, what would be your question to your innovation team? We do have our thoughts, Adrian and I, but we would but really love to hear from you what you think could be your direction or your questions to your innovation team to be able to respond to this kind of huge paradigm shift which is going on just now.
So feel free to type in your question. If you had an innovation team or if you were innovating yourself, what question would you pose? before jumping into creating innovations?
I think talking about artificial intelligence would be a big one because it has been understated, but now, like with the pandemic going on, it's been like a huge factor to push towards it. So I think the first one I would raise is technology and artificial intelligence with respects to the business context.
Right.
Very nice.
And that cuts across different processes. It's not just customer, but different areas of business.
100%.
Kavita, Terry asks, how is the company challenging its reliance on hundreds of years of colonialism, racism?
Racism.
Talks about the impact on achieving sustainable development goals. Yeah. All good questions. Mahesh supports Nima.
Mahesh +1. All right. So, in the interest of time, let's move to some of the questions, our version really of what we think would be the questions. And Krishna, your point is really very good, really very valid as to using or leveraging different technologies, including AI, in serving the customers. But the idea that we wanted to put out there is to challenge the fundamentals themselves. So there have been certain processes, there have been certain ways in which brands engage with their customers, they partner with their stakeholders, etc. And really the question that we would like to ask and would urge you to ask in case you're part of any business is how would you challenge the current ways of dealing with the customers, building network with your ecosystem, leveraging your ecosystem, partnering with them. How would you increase the speed of your innovation, and how would you, overall take cognizance of all the changes which are happening around and respond to that? For example, I was going through some stats, and about 64% of US consumers are still not resuming the normal out of home activities. So they are really homebound. So how will you make their homes a better place? And if they are staying at home, that also means that all your touch points and your customer journey largely takes place inside their home, something that you didn't have so much access to before. So how are you going to take that paradigm, to take that different space, physical and mental both, and change those? How would you also address the touch points not only in terms of cognitive and physical, but also psychological, and how would you help them cope with different challenges that they are facing? So the idea here is not to really look at the solution that will come later, and the solutions are typically very dependent on the business and industry that you are working with, but to ask the right questions, and the questions will challenge the very fundamentals on which the businesses are being run. Because, like Adrian mentioned before, the world has really come to a very different place from where it was, let's say, in January this year. It started with a standstill and now slowly easing up and getting back to normalcy in life. But in between, many things have changed, and to take to understand what those changes are and to really respond to them in the way customers would benefit from, it should or could be the starting point of the innovation. But that's so much about what really we should be doing or what questions we should be asking. But Adrian also mentioned something about space, the physical space or the place where things really happen. And I invite him back to share his thoughts on that piece with you guys. Aparna, if you can move to the next slide.
Yeah. Thanks, Kavita. So Kavita spoke of an integral ingredient of customer-centric innovation being an understanding of the changes in the cognitive, physical, and emotional needs of the people you're trying to serve. And that now brings us to the second block, which is rejuvenation of place and locations across consumer markets. No matter where you go, we now have a much keener sense of where we are and where we want to be served. Even in this virtual world, we want to make sure that we are delivered the things we want, where we want them. But with the shape of demand itself changing, demand is going to come from specific places. Even when superheroes save the world, for instance, they don't go everywhere. The showdown usually takes place in a specific location. Of course, any formal consumer inciting for innovation has one major flaw when it comes to predicting where the next wave of consumer demand will come from. And we have that on the next slide, if Aparna will take us there. And that fundamental flaw this is what it is. It is that we usually take refuge in existing sources of data that are very good for looking behind, but not very good for looking forward and being predictive. So very simply, consumer needs are changing too fast for formal research to keep pace with them. So here's our next question. When you are dealing with large land masses, continents and subcontinents, right, big markets, how do you suggest predicting where growth will come from quickly and before the growth occurs or manifests? Let's go to the next slide, Aparna, because that has the question. So very simple question. If you can look at the first one, how will you very quickly, or what method would you suggest for very quickly trying to spot where growth might occur in the near future? Studying historical movements. Nima, good, but rare view. One shouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past, but not very reliable in predicting new sources of unpredictable demand. Aban says social media current trends very good. Terry says the decline will come from flooded areas, burn areas, growth will go to high ground and wet areas. Okay, so he's taken a topographical view of things. Larry, being aware of current international political events. Perhaps, but that isn't very specific in terms of where you can serve the demand. You have to know the political undercurrents. So how would you quickly, we'll spend 30 seconds to give you some time to frame this answer. How will you predict where growth will come from? How can you? Aditya coming through with digital transformation, which is a wide-reaching answer. Thomas says we can look at where current products are being used in ways that were not intended. Very good. Yes, that is definitely a way that you can look at innovation. But let's say you have let me make it real for you. America and China is about 3.7 million square miles. India is about 1.2 million square miles. Africa is 11.7 million square miles. Where will you predict where growth is going to come from? How can you do that very quickly? Growth will come from waste resources, says Terry. All good answers, good thoughts. Ayush, yes, the new middle class. But the new middle class is so vast. 250 million households and counting, or 250 million people anyway. Which of those 200 million people will drive growth, and where will that be? Mahesh coming in with business acumen and macroeconomic factors. Mahesh, my friend, you are ready to be a CEO already. I don't know if that surprises you, but that sort of strategic answer is very well geared. Okay, but these are all good ideas. I'm sure we can find some permutation combination of them. Let's go to what we thought we could do and maybe share that with you. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide. That's right. So, if we just contrast this, sorry, I'm interested in Vito's answer. Growth will probably come from countries that have not yet experienced the financial development of a country. Hold that thought, Vito. Very, very relevant thought. And it is absolutely correct. And we'll come to a live example of that in the insurance sector. So what you have as a challenge, just to visualize the challenge for you, on the left-hand side, you have the typical way of, how things are done. 9 months to a year for mapping a large geography, which is very manpower intensive and expensive. And then you have new age methods that collapse that time frame and use, to the point that some of you made, digital models that you can use, using artificial intelligence, using econometric modeling. Let's show you what we tried to do, and get your thoughts on it. So here's an experimental method we used. If Aparna would be so kind as to go to the next slide. And Aparna can keep clicking. Yeah. Stay on that for a bit. Yeah. So here's what we did. We used geospatial data to study nighttime radiance. Nighttime radiance is very simply the value of light reflected from the surface of the Earth as a proxy for development. With geoprocessing and modeling techniques leveraging data from NASA's Earth Observatory and Goddard Space Flight Center, we divided the landmass into 100 square kilometer cells, right? Then we enriched this with publicly available government data on finance, development, and infrastructure, which is widely available. Next came the use of the econometric modeling and neural networks to find common patterns across geographic and demographic data, and identified 54 million urban clusters. We then indexed different wavelengths of spectral bands to detect impervious structures. So structures that light cannot pass through from far above, like residential and commercial complexes, industrial complexes, roads, highways, and bridges. And then an algorithm, to the point that was made earlier about artificial intelligence, algorithmic logic was then used to find common features and points of interest. Points of interest are ATMs, shopping centers, recreation centers, schools, hospitals, essentially where people spend their money and where people save their money, and created a master list of high potential micro markets or catchments. And finally, we then use something called principal component analysis to index these markets by identifying what you call uncorrelated variables that exhibited the greatest variance to the total value of a market, which is a fancy way of saying that we found unrelated features for each geography that had the greatest impact on the economic value of a market. And we found these to be the total expenditure of a catchment, household expenditure, the density of points of interest. If there are more ATMs in a place, likely there's more economic activity, and the number of crossroads. So road intersections with streets tend to have a very high correlation with economic vitality and future economic vitality. Now, we'd love to go on talking about methodology to give ourselves the false impression of intellectual superiority while making you perhaps progressively sleepier. But there's an entire 14-page paper that we can share with you if your intent is intent to cure your insomnia. But very simply saying that there are new methods that are trying to advance the cause of innovation much more rapidly at a time where you need to reduce cost, conserve cash, but at the same time be very, very laser focused and precise on serving the consumers where they need to be served, where they want to be served. If you move to the next slide, it yields a very simple output, no matter which market you're in, which continent you're on. It helped us sort out the tangle of cities, towns, pin codes, streets in any urban setting. You could do this even in a rural setting. As an example, we were able to distill the 50 fastest growing catchments of the future. Now, these locations can now form the basis for testing new concepts, sampling innovations, setting up delivery networks, and building relationships with logistics and trade partners in key areas. And soon we began seeing interesting patterns across these catchments to identify different typologies of catchments, different consumers that exist, and we sort of named these hotspots. And many of our businesses are trying to replicate this in their own category, and anybody can, frankly, replicate this to be able to serve consumers how they want to be served, not just the consumers of today, but the consumers of tomorrow. Once we get past this pandemic in a very, very different post-COVID world, it's these kinds of models that will really support the uptake and the spread of innovation. The next slide is just a demonstration of those catchments, so we'll skip that. And we come to the final piece, our final step, which we call resuscitation. Now, it's one thing to create innovation, but most innovation usually falls into one category or the other. So if you think of most innovation, it's not something bizarre that nobody has ever seen. It's usually an act of integration. Think of the iPhone pulling together different features, or it's an act of intermediation. Think of Amazon replacing different points of purchase with a platform, or it's interconnection. That's another kind of innovation. Think of Facebook collapsing various modes of connecting with each other together. But all innovation is useless if you don't have adoption and absorption by the intended consumer base. Now, to do this, we knew we had to encourage our brands to rethink the model of consumer touchpoints, not just the products or services that they have to offer, which of course they will innovate, but a broader appreciation of every touchpoint that now stands out in stark relief to consumers in a post-COVID world. Now, to walk you through that model, let me hand over to Kavita again. Kavita, over to you.
Thanks, Adrian. Aparna, could you move to the next slide? You may have to click a few times because this slide is animated. Yeah, the next one, the one after this. Yeah, keep shifting, Aparna. I think there's a couple of more slides, and then we come to, yes, the one after this. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aparna. And thanks, Adrian. So Adrian put resuscitation in a very interesting perspective of linking things together. Many businesses actually came to a standstill during the first phase of pandemic, and that's when we started studying the innovation that brands were undertaking to see how they were responding and still reaching out to their consumers, not just to sell their businesses, but to sell their products or services, but to remain connected with them. And we've studied roughly 300 to 400 responses globally to come up with this framework, which I'm going to share with you shortly. But while 300 to 400 seems like a good number, what we realize is that there are thousands of innovations which are happening just now. This is actually a time when innovations have really spiraled up and really are bringing. There are many brands and there are many businesses which are responding very quickly with lot of gusto and really great insights and trying to connect with the consumers. But what we have tried to do is to see how the first amongst the equals have been behaving. So some innovations which are not just really to the point and not just are promising to be successful, but are also different because of the kind of insights and the approach that they have used. So there are four prongs here, what we call quite literally a 4 point framework. What this really is a framework that could help the brands design their innovation in a sharp, focused way. And let me quickly take you through this. So these are four prongs which we feel are sort of they cover the entire customer facing aspect of a business and the innovations that they can do in customer facing aspects. So the first one is purpose, which is perhaps, like I mentioned, the most universal and the strongest of the trends right now, barring of course digital. The brands that are leveraging, you will see many examples of brands claiming a higher purpose, claiming to be more for the society and community and not just for their own businesses. But the brands which are leveraging it right are the ones which are very authentic and thoughtful in the way they articulate their purpose and they work with their stakeholders, their ecosystem, and even with their customers, collaborate with them to deliver on their purpose in an effective way. Second is pivot for future. We've written innovation here. Really, this entire framework is for innovation, but what we really mean here is innovation in your product or services, very specifically, which could lead to a new value proposition as the consumer needs change. The third one is touch points transformation. We earlier discussed a little bit about ecosystem collaboration and partnering with your stakeholders in an effective way. And some of the best example of that comes from this category. So this is really about transforming your customer experience journey as your customer journey shifts completely and your touch points are not what they used to be. How do you look at the new touch points and how do they transform those? And the last one, which is communication connect, is all about one of the four shifts that we discussed earlier, which is comfort. Uh, so this relates largely to that. You know, it's about education, it's about information, it's about value addition, but it really also boils down to offering reassurance, hope, and optimism in these times when grief, sadness, worry, anxiety, etc., seem to be the markers of the society. So this is what we looked at, and we had shared this earlier with you. Maybe some of you would have received, and some of you would have gone through it. This is we shared some examples from the Tata Group of some of the innovations that we have taken up across these 4 points framework. The reason why we shared only the Tata Group examples is only because there was very little time. We sent it only today, and you wouldn't have a lot of time to go through it. So we wanted to keep it succinct and brief in terms of what we share with you as PD. But what we urge you to do is to use this as a lens as you study different brands and businesses and try to deconstruct their innovation to see where really the insights are coming from and what really is the intent out of these four. But all said and done, what Adrian mentioned earlier, which is making innovation successful, requires something more than just these insights or just these approaches. That's really the secret sauce. And our next question to you is, what is that secret sauce? If you look at these four prongs, they are quite distinct to each other. They're quite different from each other. But there is one common thread across. And if you could type your answer in the chat box and tell us what you think is that one common thread, that would be great. I would say this, that is hiding in the plain sight. So what would be that one common factor?
Yeah, so the final question here is, what is the key catalyst for innovations to succeed and win consumers' hearts? Mahesh says people, ideas. Mahesh usually first off the block. Great. Yep.
What else?
So I'd like to remind everyone on the webinar that, or inform you that I've been married for about 15 years, so I'm very used to awkward silences. But if you type into the chat window, we'll be able to move forward faster. Oh, Isabella, passion for that idea. That's right. Value congruence. That's a very nice term. Customer change in societal culture. Miranda, I assume that means understanding changes in societal culture and responding to them appropriately so that you can catalyze the uptake of that innovation. It's a very good thought. Exactly right, Carolyn. That's right. Good timing. No point getting your innovation out there at the wrong time. So many brands and innovations have failed just for that reason. Aditya, yes, design thinking, the broader sense of design thinking, and Kavita is a big fan of that. Mihika, understanding the needs of the consumer. Yes, going back to basics, we'll come to what those needs are. Creating new needs, Martina, that's very right. Innovation isn't just about serving old needs, it's also about creating emerging needs. Having a competitive advantage for sure, Isabella. Veto, making it resilient to changes, so making something that can adapt and be relevant to different contexts. Very true, very true. Okay, keep the answers coming because, of course, this call is being recorded. Latifa says different perspectives. That's right. Latifa, if I remember correctly, you had cited Hulk as your superhero, so different perspectives is very appropriate, depending on what stage of rage you're in. Yes, targeted engagement with your consumer base. Very true, very true. Martina, understanding customers more than others through the use of science. Science, perfect. Let's be all be fans of science and move to the answers, even as you send us more. Martina, very close to the answer that we're going to showcase. So Kavita just showed us that in a post-pandemic world, purpose is paramount, provenance of place is pertinent, contact and communication is critical. So what we've done is actually to create this resurgence and really vibe with customers, no matter what innovation you come up with. We've developed over the last 2 years an education and an appreciation for the human factors, what we now know as behavioral sciences. So we went about having fortuitously met with Professor Jonah Berger of Wharton to adopt his framework. He calls his framework using the acronym REDUCE. But we invented a backronym. What is a backronym, you may ask? A backronym is when you know the acronym you want and you retrofit the words into it. Not a technical term, of course, but one that you will now never forget for its sheer inelegance. The principles that we've had our brand leaders imbibe, however, focus on reducing people's resistances, what psychologists call reactance, what your parents called stubbornness. In the insurance category, for instance, the first example, we, to the point that somebody made earlier about the financial category being not developed or looking at the development of financial categories, insurance in most developed markets is at a percentage penetration of 1%, which shows you the tremendous private insurance, tremendous opportunity. So in the insurance category, our brands actually proactively added insurance cover during the COVID pandemic when people were most concerned about how they would foot their health bills or still worse, deal with a bereavement in the family. The other thing we took care of when you think of behavioral science is things like offering video tutorials to our competitors in our trucks or commercial vehicles business to competitor truck owners so that they can overcome their attachment to their existing brand, what psychologists call the endowment effect. Then again, if we moved past that, we introduced innovative payment schemes to shift people from their attachment to gas guzzling internal combustion engines to a new line of electronic vehicles. So helping them shift their preferences ever so gradually, but ever so effectively. And the other example where we reduced uncertainty, the example that comes from our chain of luxury hotels, the Taj chain of hotels, Indian hotels, it's a business that has pivoted to online ordering and delivery with special hygiene protocols and packaging, which even a few months back would have been unthinkable for the luxury hospitality category. And the last example about generating endorsement, which is also very necessary to encourage the uptake of innovation. The example that we have is our apparel brand Trent has used social media to generate public endorsement for their festive wear on social media, on Instagram in the upcoming festive season, and already seen demand even before the festive season has kicked off. So, just for want of time, I think the big secret sauce that Kavita was talking about in the final rejuvenation, if you will, is the use of behavioral science to understand people, how they are and where they are, and the innovative use of behavioral science all around. Next slide, Aparna, which is our final slide. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, superheroes, satellite data, and the science of human behavior all in one presentation. But the real heroes of today are, of course, you for your patient listening and energizing ideas in the chat window. And if the world has ever needed superheroes, it is now. And if the world has ever needed superheroes, it is talented people like you. So there's no better time than the present to harness your powers for the greater good. Thank you for giving us a patient listening, and we loved all your ideas and look forward to interacting with you, over email, on LinkedIn, whatever mode you please. So all the best for the future. And any questions, Aparna? If there's time, we're happy to take.
If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat before we move on to the second part of tonight's event. And as we do, feel free to also continue to chat Adrian and Kavita. As we go forward, we have a question from Martina. Does your group use neurosciences or neuromarketing?
Yes, Martina. In fact, last year we did a special project. I have a specific interest in neuroscience. I used to run the neuroscience business for Nielsen in South Asia. We use neuroscience to tell us what the most effective way of building stories in communication is. Again, another very important element in making sure people get your message and understand it. But when you do it with neuroscience, you're able to identify the unspoken or the unarticulated needs, and that's what we've used and shared with our brands. So, Martina, great question. Very, very useful, right at the cutting edge, but still something that has a long way to go in terms of very, very many brands adopting it. I've been on the neuroscience journey for, I think, the better part of half a decade, and it is as exciting as when I first started.
Can I reply to that?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, manager, for what you have said in your experience. And actually, you are right. What we can study is exactly the unspoken part of what a customer says. I'm studying the use of the EEG as a scientific instrument, for instance, to understand the response of a customer in the upper part of his frontal lobe. For the other colleagues, it's useful to understand if a customer accepts a product or rejects a product. And I think that big multinationals like Procter & Gamble, for instance, they are really making a very good use of this kind of research method, and it could be a good point of reference. Just that. Thank you for what you have said, by the way.
Yeah. Absolutely right. I think the electroencephalograph that you've spoken of to measure the brain signals of the neocortex is something that we are going to use again. So far you could only do it if people were sitting and very still. And now the latest movement in that technology, because they've integrated Bluetooth, is you can do it when people are ambulating or walking around. So you can simulate shopping environments, car clinics, a very, very useful tool to understand unspoken and unarticulated responses. Thomas has a good point. Thomas seems to say, it seems focusing on a behavior model, you are not maximizing actual value it creates for the market base, but perceived value. That's very true, Thomas. I think it all depends on what your definition of value is, and a value is also very difficult to define. So one of the simplest definitions of value is, how does the customer define value? So if the customer defines value as needing you to coax them into gently changing their mindset for their betterment, then that is also value. What they're asking you to do, Thomas, is, look, I understand the facts, but deal with my emotions, deal with my anxieties, reduce the uncertainty, give me the reassurance of endorsement. And that's what we found to be a real game changer. I'd also advise you to read the third book by Professor Jonah Berger, which encompasses all of the science around it, where value is what the consumer perceives, not just what's in a product. Many products have failed despite being absolute game changers, for want of timing or not understanding the human factors. But that's a great observation, Thomas.
Adrian, I had a question regarding the process of cash transfers in developing markets and how customers choose to spend their funds that they receive from cash transfers rather than other government subsidized generated income and your thoughts on it. It's been something we've been studying at the center in terms of West Africa, but curious in all markets in general.
Yeah, so, this is a fascinating subject, and in fact, if you had cracked it 2 years ago, Nima, you would have been in line for the Nobel Prize, because the Nobel laureates for the economic prize last year, Professor Banerjee and Esther Duflo, won it precisely because they were talking of that. Now, I'm going to deal with your question. It has very little to do with microfinance. I want to quickly put that out there, because the big thing when it comes to microfinance or even innovation diffusion is network science. So what Professor Banerjee and Esther Duflo realized, Nima, is the uptake of microfinance, whether it came from government-subsidized players or private players, depends on what point in the network you inject it. So what they found is, let's go to the most influential person and see whether microfinance spreads faster through them. They found that it didn't matter if you went to the most influential people. What mattered was something called eigenvector centrality, which is a fancy way of saying it's not it's not what you know, it's who you know. So the people who knew more influential people, not the influential people themselves, were the people to go to. In and of themselves, they don't seem like a node, but because they're connected to someone very influential, they become a multiplier for the uptake of microfinance. So I think the next horizon is really network sciences when you talk of the uptake of innovation or microfinance. But a very exciting area, Nima. Sorry if I've extended the answer. It's an area of great passion. The book is on my desk as I speak. So
it's an area of passion of mine too. So I'm happy that you elaborated for our audience. It's great to hear your perspectives. I think that's all the questions we've had so far. If I'm missing any, but feel free to continue. Do we have one more?
Terry has one final question, and I wanted to address it, Nima, if we have 30 seconds, because we are partners with Starbucks in India. And Terry, so Starbucks value was a destination as the third place. COVID took away the destination. In the last 6 months, we've seen Starbucks innovate tremendously, right from beverages that are home delivered to only takeaway to protocols in store that make sure that it's COVID safe, to, in the midst of a pandemic, launching a women's only store in Mumbai, in India. So, innovation and value takes many, many different forms. It's not just destination. And that's what we've learned, that brands are fundamentally revisiting what the new measures of value or the new notions of value are in a post-COVID world. That's my final answer. Thanks, Tima.
My pleasure. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to chat them and we'll keep it as a digital conversation. For both Adrian and Kavita, thank you so much for all of the invaluable insight you've shared with us. It's been a true pleasure, and there have been so many lessons learned that when students are thinking what they're learning in their coursework versus what they're learning in their studies to what they're going to learn in their internships, this is a great way to frame us to our next session. So it's our privilege to transition over to first getting an overview of Tata North America from Michael McCabe, Resident Director for North America at Tata Sons. After Michael, we will learn about the Tata Global Internship Program with Aparna Jain, lead for Tata Global Internships, Education and Careers Advisory. We're also lucky to have Kunal Harmalekar and Michelle Liu, two of the 24 students who did this internship. Both of these two students were of 24 international students worldwide who participated. So they're giving a great insight to what the Tata Global Internship Program looks like. Going towards Michael McCabe, he currently serves as the Resident Director for North America at Tata Sons, the principal investment holding company and promoter of Tata companies. He is responsible for Tata Sons' government affairs and strategy development across North America and works with Tata companies to help them strengthen their presence and positioning in the United States and Canada. Mr. McCabe is a veteran of Tata, having previously worked with Tata Consultancy Services, TCS, since 2005, where his most recent role was Head of Government Relations for North America, responsible for government relations, public policy, and public affairs across a region that accounts for more than 50% of TCS's global revenues. Earlier, he was the Director of Communications for North America, leading the company's corporate communications initiatives. Prior to joining TCS, Mr. McCabe worked at various public affairs and communications firms where he developed and executed campaigns for a number of leading technology, consulting, education, and financial services companies and organizations. Mr. McCabe is an international public policy and corporate communications veteran with experience developing and implementing government strategies across various industries. He has developed and implemented programs targeting internal and external audiences, including public policy makers, media, employees, investors, and customers. Mr. McCabe is the son of a U.S. Foreign Service officer. Graduating from high school in New Delhi, India, he holds a BA in International Relations from George Mason University and resides in the Washington, D.C. metro area with his wife and 2 daughters. We'll pass it over to learn more about Tata in North America. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nima, and thank you to the University of Maryland, and thank you to my colleagues, Adrian and Kavita, for joining us so early in their morning, starting at 3:30 a.m. Their time. So we greatly appreciate all of what they shared today, and I'm based on the inputs to the chat, it seems like it was a very engaging session for the students who joined. One thing I'd be curious to see from everyone, and you can just populate the chat, as and when you see fit. I'm just curious where people are coming from. So if you go to the University of Maryland, I'd like to know that. If you go to another school, and are joining us regardless, I'd like to know that as well. So if you could populate that would be great. A lot of University of Maryland, University of Manchester, UK. Okay. The point I'm getting to is that we just had a whole presentation about the journey that a company can take to innovate and solve problems. And come up with new solutions. And all of you students are on your own journey, figuring out, what you want to study, what you want to learn, what you want to be when you grow up, so to speak. I think most of us that's an ongoing journey. My personal journey with coming to the Tata Group actually dates back to 1986. When, as Nima mentioned, I actually graduated from high school in New Delhi, India. I started high school in 1986, graduated in 1989. And at that time, my exposure to the Tata Group was limited to their symbols, the big T, as you can see on this screen, on this slide, that is on all of their trucks and buses in India. And continues to be to this day. And so that really was my first exposure to Tata. And fast forward to 2005, when I got my first job at a Tata company, Tata Consultancy Services. That experience, and since then, has broadened my view of course, what Tata is and has been for over 150 years. So Aparna, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you, and click again. And one more. Great. So the Tata commitment is one that was founded back in 150 years ago by our founder. And it really adheres to this statement that's on the screen there. In a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. And therefore, our mission is to improve the quality of life of the communities we serve globally through long-term stakeholder value creation based on leadership with trust. Now, some of you, at least here in the United States, might be aware that last year, big organization called the Business Roundtable came out with a statement that was basically changing the direction of how their members define value creation. Before, it was very much focused on shareholder value, and of course that is very important for any business. But their statement last year committed them to also be focused on other stakeholders, including the community. Well, that's great that they came out with that last year. We've been doing it for 150 years. So, Aparna, if you could go to the next slide. So this is just a big, broad overview of the group global. As you've heard, over 720,000 employees, 100 countries, group revenue 113 billion. But as has not been mentioned, about 2/3 of it is from outside of India. So while the group was founded in India and still is a very large part of the Indian environment and business community, 2/3 of the Tata Group business is really global. So if you could go to the next slide, Aparna. This slide reinforces what I said on the first slide about the stakeholder commitment to community. It is not only enshrined in our mission and our founding, but it is enshrined in our financial makeup. So 2/3 of our ownership goes to public charitable trusts, the Tata Trusts in India, which are several different charitable trusts that fund a variety of social initiatives, including health, environment, education, and others. And so I think you would be hard-pressed to find another corporation that has a shareholding structure that is majority owned by charities, essentially. So if you could go to the next slide, Aparna. So this is kind of the makeup of the Tata Group of companies. Just to back up for a second. So I work for Tata Sons. Tata Sons is the majority shareholder, the holding company of all the Tata Group companies. The Tata Group companies are spread across these 10 verticals. There are about 30 or so operating companies, but if you include subsidiaries and others, it gets close to about 100. So quite diverse in everything from IT and telecommunications to tourism to infrastructure, financial services, automotive, steel, etc. And all of these all of these are represented in this geography in the United States and Canada. Next slide. So here we are, United States. I live in Tacoma Park, Maryland, so very close to the University of Maryland. As was noted, I head up the North American operations for Tata Sons, which for us is the US and Canada, although we do keep a watch on Latin America. This is the spread of our group companies in the United States. As you can see, there are about a dozen companies listed there, and those represent pretty much every vertical industry cluster that you saw on the previous slide. We have 42,000 employees across. So again, going back to the earlier slide about where the revenues come from, 2/3 outside of India. And while we have 700,000+ employees globally, initiative that we have been undertaking for more than a dozen years, I think 14 years now, is a partnership with First Book, which is focused on literacy, providing books to underserved youth throughout the country. And that's a partnership that we have, as I said, more than a dozen years. And a number of our companies are very focused on education initiatives, the environment, health, and other such efforts. Next slide, Aparna. So again, very diverse group of companies and leading in many of their industries, both globally and in India. I won't go into everything here, but just a few things to make it more tangible for you here in, most of you are here in the US. Some I saw are in Europe, Australia, the UK. But for example, if you're a tea drinker, Tetley is a brand that we own under Tata Consumer Products. If you're a coffee drinker in the US, 8 O'Clock Coffee is a brand that we own. If you use Ever-Ready or Energizer or Duracell batteries, the steel wrapper that keeps everything, all the innards together, is made by Tata Steel here in the US. If you use the internet, which we are currently using right now, you have about a 1 in 3 chance of using the data going over the fiber optic cables of Tata Communications, which are all undersea fiber optic cables. And we have Tata Chemicals, which has a large soda ash mining operation in Wyoming. Soda ash is a base ingredient for every glass product out there. So the screens on your laptop or smartphone or the glasses that you wear, as I'm wearing. So yes, so a lot of things that are seen and unseen come from Tata companies. Next slide. And again, going back to the global footprint, this clearly demonstrates that we are everywhere. We're not in Antarctica, as far as I know. That did come up earlier, but pretty much every other continent, we have a sizable presence. Many of our companies do, and growing as well, and diversifying. Next slide. And pioneering firsts. You know, we're the first of. We've done the first of many things. For example, in India, as I mentioned, the founder came here, went back to India, started the first indigenous steel mill in India, and this was under the British, governing authorities at the time, where then they had everyone in India or outside of the UK had to actually buy the finished steel goods from the UK and ship them. And so our founders decided that didn't make sense, so let's make steel in India so that we can use it in India. First indigenous Indian hotel chain, which has now become a global 5-star hotel chain, the Taj Hotel, which has properties in the US, New York, San Francisco, the UK, the Middle East, of course, many in India as well. First 8-hour workday in 1912. I mean, think about that. I mean, the 8-hour workday has become such commonplace, at least in the United States and many other parts of the world. But back in 1912, our founders had come up with that idea as a way to ensure that the workers were being treated fairly and were getting the rest that they needed so that they could be productive at work the next day. A lot of initiatives that are first and are now commonplace, but were invented or pioneered by the Tata Group. Next slide, Aparna. I don't need to belabor this. I think we heard a lot about customer centricity on the previous presentation, but needless to say, that is a key ingredient of why the Tata Group has been so successful. Next slide. And again, innovation, sustainable innovation. In fact, I read was it last week, I think? So Tata Motors, which is a big automotive company that we own, also owns Jaguar and Land Rover, which are brands that you may have heard of. I saw last week that Jaguar Land Rover has come up with a solution to use recycled plastics of some kind, I can't remember exactly, to make their interiors of their vehicles. So talk about sustainable innovation. I mean, there's a perfect example. But needless to say, there's a lot of effort around driving innovation in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way. Yes, sorry, Aparna, you could go to the next slide. Again, global brands are very well recognized. Many of them, I mentioned them, that you may be familiar with. In India, of course, we're a top brand, but also globally, we're a top and growing brand as well. Next slide. And our brands have been around for a number of years. My first Tata employer, TCS, a couple years ago celebrated its 50th anniversary. Now we're up to 52 years. The Tata Group last year was 150 years, and now we're at 151, I believe. And Tetley Tea, 180-year brand. The Taj Hotel Group, 115 years. So we've been around for a while, but we're constantly reinventing our brands and reinventing our businesses and the solutions and offerings that we provide to customers. Next slide. This is our chairman. So before he became the chairman of the Tata Sons and the Tata Group, he was my boss at my previous employer, Tata Consultancy Services. He was the CEO there, and he's now been in this role for over 2 years, I think 2.5 years, as chairman. And his strategy is to drive one Tata. As you saw in all these slides, this is the last slide. As you saw in all these slides, very big, very diverse group across many different industries, many companies. And so his goal is to really drive this one Tata strategy that brings simplification, synergizing, scaling, long-term value creation, and focus on talent. And talent is a good way to pivot to the next presentation, which will be led by my colleague Aparna, who will highlight the Tata Global Internship Program, which I hope all of you are here to hear about and to apply for. Last year was the first year that we kicked it off, of course, having to pivot from in-person to online, and learned a lot, and everything I heard was good. And so Aparna is now ready to share the nitty-gritty with all of you, and looks forward to getting all of your applications. So over to you, Aparna.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Adrian and Kavita. That's really been quite a morning. A shout out to my colleague Ria as well. I know she's here, and she's going to be answering all the questions in the chat window. So I just wanted to say thank you, and we wanted to talk to you about the Tata Global Internships, UMD, and I know there are students from elsewhere as well, but UMD has been very special in terms of its place with the Tata Global Internships last year. We had 2 students from UMD, so a huge welcome to Kunal and Michelle, who both worked with different Tata companies, albeit remotely, and are here to share their experiences with you as well. So as soon as we go through the presentation, do feel free to address your questions to Kunal and Michelle, and what better than to hear it from the horse's mouth. So, we are operating virtually, and under normal circumstances, we would have probably been at UMD, probably, having this wonderful evening with some pizza, donuts, and what have you, and just getting to know lots more people and chatting with you. But this is the best we can do, so we're really looking forward to lots of questions in the chat window. And my colleague Ria will also pop down our email address, so do feel free to email us with whatever else that there may be. I think Adrian, Kavita, Mike have all talked about how we're all explorers at the moment. Everyone's had to go back, revisit, look at how the new normal is going to pan out. What does it mean for everyone, even? And really trying to pivot to make sure that businesses survive, businesses thrive, people thrive and survive. And virtual meetings like this one, so just having people from all 6 continents on this call is really special. This isn't something that would have happened before. It would have been limited to our physical outreach. So this really is one of the most wonderful things that has come out of this. So, everyone's going the same way, and so are we. For a 150-year-old plus group, we've had lots of twists and turns along the way. But instead of today really being about all of the past and what we've done and everything else, we thought we'd use today to just tell you how a 152-year-old company has acted like a nimble startup in these times and how we've pivoted. Just really what's been the driving force, what's compelled us to act like this in such times, and just what does it mean for you at the crossroads that you're on. But before we do that, just a little bit on the Tata Group. I know Mike's just taken us through the Tata North America presence and given us, a sense of where we're at in the world. But I just want to go back into history a little bit and just say that this isn't the first time we've, battled a pandemic, actually. We've helped fight more than one, beginning from the bubonic plague, the Spanish flu, and, here we are. As Mike also said, 66% of our profits actually go back into supporting the community, and that drives a lot of what we do. So nation building is pretty much at the core of our existence, and you will see that a lot of our actions stem from that. So as a company, as you can tell, we don't brag too much. So this is the most we're allowed to, sort of say. So this is like our secret brag sheet, and we're immensely proud of this. We pretty much operate in everything from automotive to artificial intelligence to analytics to, in India, they often say from salt to steel to software conglomerate. And that's true and more. You saw a smattering of all of the sectors we were present in Mike's presentation, and that continues to grow. So at the moment, we're generating a group revenue of over $113 billion annually. We have some top marquee international brands such as Jaguar Land Rover, Tetley Tea, in terms of things you may see regularly. And, just the value of the Tata brand itself is quite a number. It's over 20 billion US dollars at the moment. So just for the value of a brand, that's incredible, you will agree. And, in terms of our presence in the rest of the world, this is pretty much where we're at. So we are present in over 150 countries in various industries and growing. And in fact, just yesterday, a market, something in the newspaper just said that actually Tata Consultancy Services is now the most valuable, in terms of market value. And it's number one for IT services, surpassing Accenture as well. So, and that's actually been a post-COVID, outcome. Yes, Mahesh, absolutely. Q2 results have completely added to that. So just, I said we were allowed to brag very little because that's not what we, that's just culturally not who we are. It is about serving the community. It is about purpose, about nation building, and we continue to do that. So the first story I want to share very briefly with you is how some of our companies took a tour, literally and metaphorically, to save lives. So, our Tata automotive companies had to look at, go back to their playbook and look at how to re-engineer themselves to help in the pandemic. This included things like moving from manufacturing automotives to manufacturing ventilators, to speeding up the supply of PPE kits by importing huge consignments into India. And in the UK, printing 3D visors, which were very much the need of the hour. So not only have our factories in India been involved in doing so, in the UK as well, the Jaguar Land Rover plants have all been doing this as well, and continues to be the case. So the result, over 1,400 ventilators and respirators already manufactured and counting. I think some of these numbers are really astounding when you think about it. I mean, 14,000 3D visors every single week, 280,000 reverse transcription, chain reaction tests, and more. So, in terms of a business pivoting, I don't think there could be a better example than this. So, this is a story that we're particularly proud of, and we're very inspired that group companies are thinking and innovating to this degree. In addition, there's vehicles deployed globally just to help with emergency response as the strain on ambulances and health services continues to grow. So this is something that really has been tremendously, inspiring for all of us. The other story that we'd like to share is a story about Tata Consultancy Services. When the pandemic hit and children were forced to basically work from home as well, parents were thrown into a tizzy. So were schools because they weren't equipped for this, and students as well, because in a lot of lower income backgrounds they just weren't adequately geared up to combat what was coming. So, how did our digital expertise help students and educational institutions in a crisis like this? Well, the Tata Consultancy Services has a platform called the TCS Ion platform, and a product called the Glassroom was just opened up to everyone for free as everyone looked for solutions, to battle these problems and to find solutions to get onto the online learning platform and curve as quickly as they could. What this meant was over 2,000 institutions and 500,000 learners across 5 continents were able to get onto this, quickly learn what needed to be done. Students received training to make this process easier. And teachers also received a free digital course called the Career Edge, which helped them enhance their skills for virtual learning, for virtual teaching. So this has been something that has been ongoing and continues to be, as the ambiguity around work from home, just continues in a country like India and a lot of the developing world where a lot of the lockdown measures haven't been removed just yet. And finally, the third story that I'm going to share with you is about the Indian Hotels company that owns the Taj Group of hotels. No prizes for guessing. Hospitality really wasn't seeing queues outside, and a lot of the online booking engines in terms of hotel rooms were just absolutely numb and still when the pandemic hit. So how did the Indian Hotels company spring into action? And I know this story is going to be particularly special for Kunal, who actually worked with the IHCL during this period. So they went back to the drawing board. Instead of getting into a state of paralysis with the fact that the hotels weren't seeing any guests, it was unlikely to change or improve for some time. Things needed to be done. There was a ton of problems out there. Doctors weren't getting the care they needed. So what is it that the Taj Hotels did? Well, they opened up the doors of the Taj Hotels to the medical fraternity. This included creating and curating nutritious meals on a daily basis, 3 times a day, to hospitals across India for caregivers. Over 2 million boxes of fresh meals were served. In addition, doctors and nurses initially were completely stumped by the numbers that just hit hospitals and were finding it hard to go back home and come back to hospitals, because of the fear of infecting their own families, and B, just because they needed to be on call 18 hours a day. So the Taj opened up its doors and welcomed the medical fraternity in to to use as their home for as long as they needed. And this was something that happened for at least 3 or 4 months until things sort of calmed down. And I know that a lot of Taj hotels are still being used as quarantine facilities and are extending their doors much beyond. So getting nutrition in for the medical community was also something that was very important. And a lot of the chefs went behind this, put their heads together, and thought of various solutions. There's many other stories, including building a hospital in just 1 week. The Feluda test, that's the instant COVID test, is also on the verge of being rolled out. Sanitizer kits being manufactured by Tata Chemicals, and many, many more. These have been amazing stories around us that just tell us about the resilience that so many of our colleagues and companies have demonstrated during these times, and they've really helped pull things through. But it's not just our companies that have been exploring. We've had, as Nima said, and as Mike said, we had our first intake for the Tata Global Internships last year. The Tata Global Internships were set up as a gateway for international students, across the world to experience what work was like, what life was like within the Tata Group. And often the feedback we got was that it's too complicated to find our way around it. So we decided to constitute this internship program for students all around the world, no matter where they're studying, no matter where they're from. But this is a common gateway for them into the Tata Group. So, just a few stories about our interns. And like I said, we can reach out to Michelle and Kunal both on the call as well as later to ask them what their experiences have been. But this is the story of one of our interns that his major is computer science, and he was an incoming sophomore and found himself on a biotech project, and placed at Tata Chemicals, where for the first time he experienced bioinformatics. This was quite eye-opening for him. He's enjoyed the experience so much. He's had complete autonomy over how the project's gone, over the solutions he suggested and brought to the project, and working virtually with the team that supported him to create this solution. So this has been one. Cheryl from the National University of Singapore, who worked on one of the retail projects, has also had an exciting story to tell. She's gone back and has started her own business, and just inspired by her time doing her project within retail and all of the options that came with it. So this has been another exciting one. Ricardo, who was doing his degree in sustainability and worked with our coffee, worked on a project with Tata Consumer Products Limited, which revolved around the coffee estates in South India, and just looking at sustainability and the positive impact that could be created in this space, has also used this as part of his dissertation and created some groundbreaking work. This is only a small example. All of the interns have had wonderful stories, and it's pretty much spanned. And I'll show you what some of the project options have been last year and what it could mean for you this year as well. So, everything's changing. Remote work is here to stay. We may go back to the physical, hybrid model. And there's many theories around what the world is going to go back to. No one knows as yet. But just with this situation that we're in, it's important to place contours so that as students, you get the most to kickstart your careers, get involved in really challenging life projects, and experience culture despite being miles away. So that's what the Tata Global Internships promise, and that's what we want to make sure we live up to every single bit of this. So you will get to work on group and individual projects with seasoned professionals, and hopefully make lots of friends along the way doing some of the fun stuff that you're going to do. So just as context, India is the second largest startup in the world, a startup hub in the world. It is the fastest growing service sector in the world as well. And most importantly, as you get into your careers, the most important statistic that also came out, I think, as part of Adrian and Kavita's presentation, is that the maximum number of under 25 consumers globally are in India. In fact, by 2030, a quarter of the world's workforce is going to come from India. So no matter where you're going to be in the world, these networks are going to be important because it could be as a customer, as a vendor, as an employee, as a partner, or in any which way. You can't ignore the fact that the intersection with India is going to happen. So why not get a head start on it and really kick off with the Tata Global Internships? So just some of the other projects that people worked on. There's projects across corporate finance, consulting, digital transformation. I know Michelle worked on a really interesting QSR consulting project. That's a quick service restaurant for Tata Cha. Across finance, strategy, and so much more. In addition to this, you can also put your hand up for sustainability, climate consulting, impact consulting, and much, much more. A trip or a virtual trip to India can't be complete without immersions that ensure that you experience culture and the social connects. So what you will do is you will build memories and bonds with several other interns globally. There's a few things that are up on screen. So whether it's experiencing Bollywood dance classes firsthand, whether it's doing a master class, which could be just you showing your fellow interns what you're really good at and offering to conduct a master class over there. Whether it's just deciding to throw in your name in the roulette hat every Monday to say, look, I'm up for meeting people on Thursday, and I want to chat with people from interns from around the world, and just get to know them better and develop those friendships and bonds. And every Thursday, randomly you'd be paired with people. And for me, whenever I logged on to these, this was highly enjoyable. And I'm told that this has been one of the big highlights, even for a lot of the students doing this program. And just other team building stuff like Clue Hunt and some more. Mentorship forms a huge part of your internship. And this is something that is really, not enough can be said about this. So not only is it important to reach out to the project teams that you work with for mentorship, but also outside of that. So on the top of the screen, you can see a picture of Michelle from UMD, who indicated that she wanted to meet somebody that led businesses in sustainable, in sustainable consulting and in creating an impact in terms of the business she ran. So she met with the head of Okai, which is a platform and a product line that Tata Chemicals has created with the rural women in the area that the biggest factory, the salt factories are. People met different people. Somebody doing a project in finance said, I'm really interested in AI and I want to speak to somebody senior in AI so that they can give me a bird's eye view of what's going on. These pretty much ranged across design, finance, AI, design thinking, machine learning, and much, much more. So that you're also able to broaden that network slightly and not just speak to only the project team that you're working with. If you were physically in the country, it would have been different. Or if you were doing the project in person anywhere in the world, I think it's a different experience because you're able to walk up to people, have that coffee, and just set that up. But when it's virtual, a lot of thought goes into putting these things together, and we're really glad that people were able to benefit from this. A trip to India, like I said, can't be complete without the cultural immersion. What better cultural immersion than experiencing the Taj hotels? So, we requested the head of learning in the Indian Hotels Company to take us through a virtual walk of the Taj. And she did so, sharing stories, many stories of when the Taj first opened, right down to the recent terror attacks. And it's been really, I think that's been a great experience as well for the students. So with all of this, what does that mean for you in terms of how can you be a part of the action? So the application process has opened. We opened on the 1st of September, and applications go on until the end of December. The application process effectively comprises of an online application where you apply with a CV and a personal statement. The personal statement can really be a cover letter, it can be a video, it can be a collection of memes, just anything that tells us who you are. It doesn't have to be, we don't want it to be cookie cutter. It doesn't have to talk at us. We want to speak to you and know what you're all about, what motivates you, what keeps you awake at night. So do share all of those things with us when you apply, and do indicate to us what your area of preference is in terms of what sort of business do you want to work in, where do you see yourself. It doesn't mean you have to have experience in that sector, but it just tells us that this is why you're thinking of what you're thinking. For students that make it past the first round, you have an asynchronous video interview. And this is an automated email that comes to you, and you answer a few questions on the system that are generated at random. And post this, you get invited to the business interview with the final business that you may be doing a project for. So that will typically be in January or February, and an offer will be rolled out after. So what's included with the internship? I should mention all internships are going to be 100% virtual for 2020-21, just because there is no clarity on the situation, and how this is going to change. We know it was hugely disappointing last year because everyone was all set up to have, a couple of months in India to experience so many things. And honestly, pivoting from that for a lot of the interns was also really hard because it's completely changing plans, and a virtual internship, when you've signed up for something which is going to be in person, is sometimes hard to accept. So just with that, and with all the ambiguities that surround us, we felt that the best thing to do is to go virtual for next year. But we can promise you, and hopefully Michelle and Kunal will be able to corroborate, that the virtual experience has been a good one, and it's something that we would highly recommend. So you also have lots of work, play, and new explorations, as well as access to the Tata Tomorrow University's content, which is something new. It's an answer to the world's second oldest corporate university completely going online during this pandemic, and thereby being able to put all Tata learners on the same page for the first time. So this is something that we're going to invite you into the fold for as well. So honestly, the secret to change is not to focus all your energies on fighting the old, but building the new. We've done that, you've done that, and together we want to do that even more. So join us on our journey to shape the new world and be a part of the action. So come, let's explore this together. I just wanted to take a second to talk about our logo. You've seen the squiggles change through the presentation. The reason this is the logo is because the orange and green welcome you to a group that's headquartered in India. The yellow is the bright minds that you are, and together we form this circle. And the blue is the Tata blue, and the reason the blue is always in movement and in squiggles is because those are the explorations that we're undertaking along with you. So we welcome all of your questions at this stage, and we look forward to your application to the program. So if you've got any questions, do email us. The email's on the screen. You can check out the website, as mentioned here. And at this stage, I think I'm just going to say, if you have questions, if you'd like to unmute yourself. I know Ria's been answering and Dharna's been answering a lot of questions as we've been talking, but happy to answer any questions in person. And I will also request Michelle and Kunal to turn on their videos so that you can direct your questions to them as well, if you like.
Thank you, Aparna. So my name's Krishna from Australia, and you talked about one of your students from 2020, last year's internship batch, where they instilled in her the entrepreneurship skills that are needed to start a business. So that brings me to my question. I just wanted to ask, how is leadership emphasized at Tata, and sort of how will that be tested during the internship?
Okay, actually, can I turn that question to Michelle or Kunal? Because I think there's nothing better than hearing it from the horse's mouth. So let them tell you about how it's pushed them to lead their own projects, and then I can come back in.
Thank
So
you.
Michelle, Kunal, whoever would like to go first?
Yeah, I can take that one. So, although I was in fairly regular contact with my team, so for context, I was working with IHCL, Indian Hotels Company Limited, and I was helping them think through the global expansion of a business unit that sort of sits within the Taj Hotel. So, doing a lot of analysis on markets in a very luxury space that I didn't have a lot of personal knowledge of. Although I would meet with my team pretty frequently, being asynchronous and remote, there was a lot of times where I was driving the project by myself. I was working on this project completely individually with oversight from my mentor, but being able to take charge, break down the work stream, and set your own goals and expectations for every day was really critical. And I think that's where leadership really comes in being able to take charge and being able to ask for work, to be proactive about asking for feedback. So especially with, I think, the move to remote and asynchronous, leadership is so much more important.
Excellent. Thank you, Kunal.
Thank you, Kunal. So just to add to that, I think the experience has pretty much been similar across. I think that, the projects are loosely defined with clear objectives, but they don't actually tell you how to get there. So your own leadership skills, your critical thinking skills, creativity, all kicks into action, and it really helps take charge.
Thank you.
Hi, Aparna. I had a quick question for you.
Sure, Mahesh.
Firstly, I love the presentation. Thank you for sharing that with us. My question is essentially in the chat, Priya said that there are 50 students that got selected, right? And we have 2 here.
Right.
So I'm trying to understand, sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to understand what is the next step? What is the trajectory after this?
So the trajectory after this is, honestly, do you mean in terms of scale for the program, or do you mean in terms of just where do you go from here?
No, in terms of, I understand there's autonomy in the project, but then overall, in terms of inclusion into the Tata Group, is that a likely possibility?
Okay, so the thing is, the reason it's not implicit in the design of the program is that for many people, this is an experience in a country that they may or may not be familiar with. So at that stage, to actually say that, hey, so here's your internship, and oh, by the way, maybe you should interview for a full-time role, is a bit overwhelming and inundating. So, there are a few interns that have converted to full-time, full-time opportunities. And those conversations have taken place after the internships have finished. But it's something that, you can indicate to your project mentor that this is something that you'd like to consider doing full time. Or sometimes the project mentors even come back and said, hey, I really like this person that I worked with. Can you find out if they'd be interested? And actually, we've had instances this year where students have said, actually, this sounds great, but I think I need to get my hands dirty with a smaller outfit before I before I want to come back and join the group. So it's been varied, and for that reason, we don't come, it doesn't come with an assumption that there is going to be an after sort of step.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. I don't mean to get ahead of myself or anything. Thank you so much.
And Aparna, if I could just interject briefly. For the question about converting to a full-time employee, Tata employees have a history of being there for many, many years. So there is a loyalty, there is a dedication, there is a commitment. I started in 2005, and it's 2020. And as you can imagine, if you're joining a Tata company in India, it's much more likely that you're going to be there for many years, just because there are so many opportunities to grow and diverse opportunities to challenge yourself. So layer that on top of what Aparna said about the overall commitment, that the pressure that one might feel if you're going to a new country or you're engaging in this new culture for the first time, coupled with the kind of the history of being at a company for so long, it makes it challenging at the outset to make that commitment. So, but I will say that it is a great organization, and the opportunities are so diverse and so varied that people may come back later on.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I definitely agree with that. I mean, I'm a tech ex-Tata employee myself. I worked at TCS, so I know what you mean. So I was also wondering, is there a chance in which it works, as in if you can work here in North America? Is that how it works? No.
So that's not how it was designed. It's currently designed for engaging on projects in India. And that is the way it's going to happen again this year. But this is only the second year. It is a program that is innovating every year, as a partner can attest. And so who knows what the future holds. So on North America specifically, a number of the Tata companies here do have their own internship programs, TCS being one of them. So if a person had an interest in doing an internship at a company in the United States / Canada, that would be a conversation directly with an individual company, not through Tata Sons. This is through Tata Sons.
Understood. Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions or comments?
Hi, I have one question. I'm sorry. My name is Yvonne. I'm a sophomore marketing and supply chain management major at the University of Maryland. I was just wondering, you said to apply onto the internship through the Global Internship portal, I believe. Is it also okay to apply through your university's particular hiring portal if there's the application listed there as well?
Actually, all applications need to come through the Tata Global Internships portal, because the lifetime of, so from the time you apply till the end of your project, everything's now on the portal. So we would require all applicants to be on the Tata Global Internships portal.
I'll do that. Thank you.
If you go to Hire Smith, it'll just link you straight to the portal. So no worries either way. But make sure that's where you're sending your application.
Can I invite Kunal and Michelle to just share their experiences, just so that I think it makes it a little bit more relatable in terms of the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in terms of what you've gone through.
Sure. I can go first. So my project was with Tata Cha, which is, as a partner was saying before, a QSR brand. So it was like a chain of tea cafes, and it was really unique because it was a new brand. So I kind of got to work in that like startup-y culture, like small company feel, while being part of such a large company. And so what I did day to day was I actually got the opportunity to work on a bunch of different projects. My manager just kind of looped me in on everything he was working on. So it was really nice getting a like small taste into a lot of different aspects of the business. But I worked on crafting digital strategy. I helped him with CRM and like customer segmentation, and then their loyalty program. So it was really cool getting like that perfect mix of and one of the best things about the program, I think they did a really great job transitioning it to online, because we still got a lot of opportunities to interact with other interns. So that was like, I guess the main concern I had with the switch over. I was afraid that I wouldn't get to like meet other people or work with other interns, but we had interactions like every single week. We really got to like chat with each other and like discuss our projects, and everyone's experiences were so different. But in that way, we were still all able to be connected together.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
I can share. So I already went over my project, but a little context, and I think a lot of Indian Americans can relate to this. Growing up, I would go to India pretty frequently, and there you'll see the Tata logo splashed on everything. It's on cars, it's on trucks, it's in the homes of your family. Sitting on the TV, it's everywhere. It's bigger than GE. It's bigger than pretty much any American brand you can think of there. So for me, it was never something I considered professionally. That's just a part of my personal life. I travel to India and I see Tata everywhere there. Sometimes I'll see it, for example, in the New York Marathon. If you've seen Brittany runs a marathon, that's the Tata logo on all of their little pennants. But so then, last year I was sitting at this presentation in person and, my jaw dropped. I was so shocked that, Tata from India came to the University of Maryland College Park. And in a big part, that was thanks to Nima. So I went through the application process. And in January, I was actually in India and I was emailing Ankna, I think, and asking if I could interview in person. I was so excited. But I ended up hearing back in March, very excited. And then right after I heard back, things started to sort of spiral with COVID. And as Michelle mentioned, I was pretty worried about the social aspect, about feeling engaged. But when it came to actually starting my project, pretty much constantly, I was getting emails every week about a different social event. I think, the highlight was definitely, as in my childhood home in the basement, doing a Bollywood dance on Microsoft Teams. It was a little awkward, but hilarious. And it was the most fun I'd had all summer. So really great opportunity. And, just talking with some of my friends who've had, I think, more standard internships, some of them, were cut down to just 2 weeks. A lot of them, they had the synchronous portion of their internship, but they didn't have the social part. So I feel like for what I was looking for from an internship, which was, friendship and the ability to work for a company this big and this well respected, I definitely found it, and I would highly recommend it to pretty much anyone.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And if you don't mind, Michelle and Kunal, if people have questions, can we direct them to you so that we just feel it's better getting it from the horse's mouth?
Of course, yeah.
Great, thank you. So I don't think there are any other questions on the chat. If there are, we'd be very happy to answer. Otherwise, do email us. And, Nima's been absolutely fabulous, as has Isabella and the UMD team in putting this together and in just really getting the word out for us. So thank you so much for that. A huge thank you to my colleagues, Mike and Dharna, and Adrian and Kavita, who've now gone back to bed, hopefully. And a huge shout out to my colleague, Ria.
Thanks so much, Aparna. For any students at the University of Maryland who are part of the Suitable app, here is the Suitable QR code for tonight's event. Please feel free to scan this over the next few seconds. Again, thank you so much to the Tata team. It's always a pleasure having you here in College Park, whether it's in Tizer Auditorium or on WebEx. It's just been a genuine pleasure being able to have you as a partner through this global internship program and other facets. So if anything comes up, feel free to reach out to us at UMD, feel free to reach out to Tata. And with that being said, everyone have a good night, a good morning, a good afternoon, whichever time zone you might be in right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.